Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I'm so happy to be here, and I have actually been in that room before it, as Dwight had mentioned. I was a part of the AI and Church Summit, and I received and continue to be blessed by the incredible hospitality of Epiphany Parish. Thank you a million times over for the ways in which your parish welcomes so many folks who are continuing to have these important conversations. And I'm so glad to be having this conversation with you all. And I'll introduce myself a little more fully in the midst of our conversation together. But the main thing that I want to do as we engage this fairly complex topic is to be understood and to be heard. And if you have questions, we have a couple of ways that we're going to um, receive your questions, and I'll mention that here in just a second. But again, the class that we're going to be talking about is called AI Faith in You, learning to understand and perhaps leverage AI as digital citizens and as a person of faith. So, as we engage this topic, one of the things that we're going to have to do is clear up some misconceptions about what artificial intelligence is, what the capabilities are, some of the history of AI, and what we're supposed to do about this in the midst of a changing world as persons of faith, and I think also importantly as digital citizens. And so we're going to talk about what both of those terms will mean for us functionally together. Now, this is going to be a stretch maybe, but we're gonna try something techie as we engage tech, and that is some live feedback. This will give you a chance to engage with me. I can do some polls. I can receive some input from you. And if you have a connected device like a smartphone or a tablet, you can you can go to menti.com, and you'll be prompted to put in an 8-digit code, and that code is right here on your screen. When you do that, you will have access to some feedback questions. I'll be prompting some questions. I'll show the live poll results of those questions, and it'll just be a fun way for us to interact. But also, as we really get into the meat of this presentation, if you think of a question, and the format that we're using right now is probably not as conducive to stopping and taking questions as they come. You could just write that question in on your phone, and I'll receive it, and then I'll address that at sort of the back end of our conversation together. Is thumbs up if you're on Menti? Is every folks on it? Okay, and we'll use this, and we'll see how this works together. This is something that I do use. Again, my name is Andy Morgan. As if my dialect didn't give that away, I'm Canadian, and that's not true. I'm clearly from the Southeast. I grew up in North Carolina, was educated in North Carolina and Virginia and Georgia, and now live in Tennessee. So you can tell that I'm pretty isolated to one section of the United States. But I'm so grateful to have ventured to Seattle and was received by your church. If you maybe notice this where this is on your property. And back in the fall, late summer, early fall, your wonderful parish hosted a group of ecumenical partners from the Presbyterian Church USA, the Episcopal Church, and from the ELCA Lutheran Church to come together for the first gathering of Protestants talking about the intersection of AI and faith in North America, right there in your parish. And so, when the history is written, Epiphany will be a whole chapter on the ways in which the church began to engage with this important topic. But one of the most generative questions that I had in this whole in our whole time together in Seattle was around a table, and I don't know if it was exactly this table, but we were talking, and we imagined what it might be like to go back in time and to talk to the church about another disruptive technology that the church has and continues to grapple with, and that is social media. And so our conversation dealt with, If you could go back in time and talk to the church about social media, given what we know now, what would you say? And this was such an interesting conversation because for me, I thought about all the ways that the church was really late adopters of social media, the way that we adopted the norms and usages of other industries and other organizations. And I thought, what might we say to the church, and how might we shift, for instance, the way that we imagine truth telling, the way that we imagine, for instance, uh, if, for instance, would we have to receive our affirmation from external sources, like so many folks imagine we have to do on social media? Or might the church have a different witness to be able to know that we do have and receive our affirmation and love from God? How might that have reshaped the nature of social media's usage in the church? I don't know. We can't go back in time, but we can think about what we might say to the church today about this important and equally disruptive technology called artificial intelligence. And so we're going to be talking about this and how the church might think about our usage of AI. But as we talk about this in the midst of this conversation, I'm really interested in your own questions about AI, like what your most pressing question is. And so I'm going to invite you to go to the Menti to the Menti page that you have, and your first question is, what is your most pressing question about AI? And so we will receive those questions, and I can see one: can AI learn and eventually become sentient, have a soul? It's a very large question. Um, Maybe. Maybe there's probably two parts to that question. I would say maybe to the first. I don't think so to the second, but that'll be a question that we'll discern together. What other questions do you have? Okay, why is the church such a late adopter of new technology? Can the church engage a new direction of users through AI? Become independent? Can AI create or just assemble? What are we worried about? These are good questions. These are important questions, and these are questions that certainly speak to some theological underpinnings that we will be talking about these today. You can continue to put your questions on this page, and what we're actually going to do at the end of our time, we're going to revisit these questions and imagine maybe some new questions. I'll tell you a story about my mom. Here she is with my children, and her first question about AI. So this one here, this is Robert. He's 7, and then James is 4, and then this is my mom, who they call Bunny for whatever reason, Grand Bunny. I'm not going to correct them because it's really cute. And probably a little more than a year ago, I showed my mom ChatGPT version, I think 3, and I showed her how I could come up with a lesson plan really quickly, and then how I could come up with a recipe list based on the food that we had available for us, and taste preferences and all these things. And I put the prompt in. I let the program process, and she looked at this, and she was just amazed, just absolutely enthralled by what seemed to be like conjuring. It seemed to be like a genie that had granted a wish, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, this is incredible." And then in the same breath, what are we going to do about this? Now what? And so these questions that we have as we engage with technologies that are new and that are disruptive often take the shape of now what? What do we do? I want to frame this type of question and offer us a third option that we're going to be dealing with this morning. The first response that we might have when we meet disruptive technology based, and this is based on a social ethicist named Kate Ott. This is her book. She's out of Garrett Theological Seminary. And she describes our approach to, in response to new and disruptive technology, as having two major responses. So we meet the technology and we say something like Bunny said, which is, "That's awesome. I'm scared." And so what this looks like in practice, or and from maybe the 100,000 feet view, is that we ascribe unlimited power to the technology. We say there's something that is bigger and more powerful and maybe even more autonomous about this technology that we can't fully control or even comprehend. This might be, in a positive way, a vision for a pathway to a utopian society, or it might be our doom. In both cases, though, we ascribe unlimited power to the technology. On the other hand, I've seen this equally in the talks that I've done about AI in the church. We might just say, "I don't need to know anything about this. It's just a tool. I can choose to engage with this tool or not. If I want to use it, I can learn about it. I can hone my skills, and maybe I can even use it in my industry. But ultimately, it's just a tool, which I can choose to engage with or not." Choice, agency, autonomy is the core of this response. It means that I think that I have the autonomy in this relationship between myself and this new technology. Now, if we go back to the conversation about social media, we might apply these two prompts to that and realize that social media is not, neither our doom or our savior, nor is it something that we can just let, instrumentalize and choose to use if we want to. We know that even if we, for instance, deactivate all of our social media accounts or never engage with it, our society, the fabric of who we are as people, is still heavily influenced and shaped by this technology. On the other hand, we know that this technology isn't our savior, nor is it our doom. Dr. Ott offers us a third way, and this is going to be the way that I hope we can shape our initial understanding of artificial intelligence by looking at a relationship between ourselves as humans and the technology as being mutually dependent. What she says is that we can take this approach of digital citizenship where we recognize that we have our own input and our own responsibility, and we also recognize that the technology has a massive it can make a massive difference in the usage as well. But it's a dance, it's a relationship that we have to navigate what it means to exist within. And this citizenship looks very similar to the citizenship of your city, Seattle, or your state, or even our nation, where we recognize that to be a good citizen, we have to be informed. We have to be informed both about what we believe as people and then what the wider conversation looks like and how our belief in the wider conversation may be in conflict or may be affirmed. And then we can do things like advocate, or we can do things like affirm when we see things happening that are consistent with what we believe is good and right and fair and equitable and decent. So it's this third way that we're going to really look to our relationship with AI as we learn about it. So our goals today, and this is going to be fairly lofty in the next 30 minutes. But what we're going to do is we're going to try to address the question, what is AI? Try to get through some of the misinformation, some of the media hype, and some of the marketing gimmicks, and look at what it is when we use maybe the colloquial phrase AI. What are we exactly talking about? We're also going to parse the word. We'll call it a word, ChatGPT, to learn a little bit more about the capabilities, the limitations and even the considerations for ethical considerations for persons of faith. If we do want to be a citizen, if we want to understand what are some of the ways in which our own faith may speak direction into the development and usage of AI. And then finally, we're going to revisit some of our questions in light of these social ethics, and hopefully, we will form new questions that may be guiding to us as we seek to be good citizens of technology. All right, that's what we're going to do. And I want to talk a little bit about my journey, and this will speak to your journey as well. I am not a computer scientist. You can find plenty of computer scientists in your area. I would not certainly be one of those. I am a pastor, and my training is in sociology, the history of religion, the MDiv. I have a master's in Christian education. My doctor of ministries in homiletics, nothing to do with computer science. And I do think, however, that I'm kind of funny. And when I started using AI, I just started using it as a joke. I started this spoof Instagram site called Reverend GPT, and I would come up with these like outlandish prayers that were just increasingly bizarre and weird. And you can look it up for yourself, but people were, looking at these and using these, and somebody contacted me to lead a seminar on AI. I was like, well, I have absolutely no idea outside of the jokes that I do with this. I have no idea what sorts of questions I need to be asking if I'm going to teach a seminar. So I started to do some research and ask the questions that ultimately led me to be able to teach that seminar. I then trained a GPT for polity in the Presbyterian Church. We love to be decent and in order. And so I trained a bot on how to think about Robert's rules and how to think about leading a session or a meeting of the elders. And that was and I've submitted that to the Facebook page PCUSA leaders, the Presbyterian Church USA leaders, and it was not universally liked. The GPT itself worked fine, but what I realized is this is a much hotter conversation than I had originally imagined. Um, that led me to really dig into the ethics of AI, and I started to implement ethics into my webinars. And then I attended the AI in Church conference in your lovely facility, and then I wrote an article for a journal. But I thought again that my journey began with this Instagram account, but it actually did not. As I've learned more about AI, I realized that we have been swimming in a sea of AI for a long, long time. And what I'm interested in is I want you to think about your own experience and your own journey with AI. And so I want you to think about three forms of AI that you have used or interacted with today. Not this month or this year, your entire life, but just today at 10:20 Pacific Standard Time. Now, as we think about this, we need to define terms, don't we? We need to figure out what exactly I'm talking about when I'm asking you about artificial intelligence. And so when we talk about this, and just by the way, you will get access to all the slides and all this in a PDF form. So please don't worry about taking notes. But the term artificial intelligence is actually one that's fairly older than we would imagine. It started back in 1955, and it was basically defined as the science and engineering of making intelligent machines. A natural question that we should have is, what do we mean by intelligent? What does that mean? Um, and for the purpose of the history of artificial intelligence, it meant the computer or a system's ability to perform complex tasks and solve problems. So, as we think about AI in general, we have two forms of AI. We have what's considered strong AI, and this is also known as artificial generalized intelligence or AGI. And at this point, this is theoretical. We would imagine this to be kind of science fiction. So this would be AI that would be self-aware or conscious, or one of the first questions that we received was, can AI think for itself? Can it have a soul? This blends into this type of artificial intelligence, something that's general, something that it would have the ability to operate outside of its programmed intent. At this point, we have what's called weak AI or narrow AI, and this focuses on performing specific program tasks, such as answering questions based on user input. It can play chess, it can play Go. Weak AI relies on human interference, and it has a defined parameter of its learning, and so it can do things that are highly specific, but it can't do things that are general. Um, and what we're usually talking about when people are having broader conversations about AI and the economics of it and the emergence of things like ChatGPT, they're usually talking about a large language model, which is a weak AI, and and it's a specific type of a system. And so it's an artificial intelligence that's designed to both understand and create human language. It works by learning patterns from massive amounts of text, allowing it to answer questions, write stories, explain concepts, and have conversations, like a very advanced version of autocomplete. So these are our definitions, and I wanted just to give you a taxonomy tree because I like this type of understanding myself. So if we are imagining AI as a concept, again, this is just a computer's ability to solve a problem. It exists in two forms: strong AI, like Spock here. Science fiction at this point doesn't exist. What does exist, however, is weak AI, narrow AI. And this is further delineated in between these two. Non-generative AI. So we have all sorts of examples. Text prediction, like autocorrect, virtual assistants like Siri and Alexa, spam filters on your email, fraud detection, like credit card monitoring, recommendation systems on YouTube and Netflix and Amazon, navigation systems like Waze and Maps. You could put video games in here. Lots and lots of examples of non-generative AI. On the other hand, we have what's considered generative AI, and we'll further define that word in a second. But these look like image generation, like Dolly, music generation, and large language models like ChatGPT, Meta, Gemini, Copilot. This is what we're going to be talking about primarily today. So let's go back to this question here about AI in your life right now. Let's see about your journey with AI and how maybe how you're swimming in it. And let's go back to our Menti, if you can, and let's see about our let's see. Sorry. Okay, so let's go to this question here on your Menti. Can you name three forms of AI that you have interacted with today? And maybe a show of hands, has anybody like sent a text today? Yeah, email filtering. Yep, if you've sent a text, it's autocorrect. You've interacted with AI. If you checked your email, you've interacted with AI, non-generative AI. If you've played any video games, if you've watched anything on a streaming service today, um, any of that is a form of AI. So you've asked ChatGPT about a medication. You've searched for terms, autocomplete, banking alerts. Absolutely. Maps, auto, perfect. Absolutely. So we've seen lots of examples of this with text and with email. with bank systems and GPS. What we're going to be talking about today, though, because this in terms of the colloquial term AI, it's mostly talking about a large language model, which is a generative form of AI. Now, to get at this, I think the best way, and this is at least for me, is to look at an example of a large language model. And as we look at its capabilities, look at how it works, and we're going to do that by parsing the word ChatGPT as we seek to understand a little bit more about what this is, what it isn't, and some ethical considerations that we might make as we approach this. So as we look at this particular word, you might know that there are lots of other uh, popular large language models. There's Meta, there's Claude, Copilot in your neck of the woods. There's Gemini from Google, and ChatGPT is another. And basically, these are all proprietary systems. They're all different in certain ways, but under the hood, they have a lot of the same components. And so we can imagine this to be like a car. They all have a transmission, they all have an engine, they all have exhaust. And in the same way, all large language models basically function in this same way. So this is not just for ChatGPT. I just like how clean the word breaks down for us. So as we look at this word, we see that there are four pieces of information that are helpful for us as we think about what this is, how it works, what it can do, and what it's not going to do. So we're going to look at this by, first of all, looking at this word chat. And so chat helps us to know in terms of what the narrow AI is. Again, narrow AI is supposed to be coded to do a specific task. And what large language models do is they are programmed to chat with you. So it at least implies that there is someone, you, me, on the other end who is prompting chat. It's not going to make decisions outside of its prompted chat function from your end, and it's primarily a text-to-text system. So you put in a prompt, it is processed, and you get text as an output. So it's not Terminator 2 style, it's not becoming in your world and gonna take over your life. This primarily looks like a chat partner in the same way that you have real chat partners like you text with. It's just the person on the other end is not a person, but it is a program that's meant to chat with you, and it feels natural as you will learn as you use it. The next piece is the G in ChatGPT, and this is where things get kind of interesting. So when we look at G in the GPT, G means generative. And a generative model is very different than a non-generative model. Non-generative models, like if you've used something like Siri, you know that there's certain inputs that you can ask or certain questions you can ask that will trip the system up and it'll say, oh, you might need to go to the web for that one. That means that there's some programmed responses, and if something exists outside of a program response, it's just not going to be able to do it. On the flip side, a generative model does something new. It does something original. It generates new content. And so at its core, and this is super, super important because this has legal implication and it has usage implication. At its core, a generative AI is a type of AI that's designed to create new content or new data. It's based on information that it's been trained on, but AI learns patterns from existing data and uses this knowledge to generate new and original content. Now, theoretically, and of course there's limits to this, but theoretically you could put in a prompt, you could ask for an output, and it would give you an infinite number of unique generative responses. And that's kind of different to the way, kind of different from how we normally interact with the internet and the way that we interact with data retrieval. So I'm going to give you an example of this. This is how we normally think about accessing information online, we have something like Google, and I put a query in, like who's like, what's the greatest church in Seattle? I'll put this into my query bar, and it might put me in touch with some curated information, a blog, maybe. Somebody has created a blog on Epiphany, the greatest church in Seattle. There might be a website, your website, Epiphany. There might be some YouTube videos of some of Deutsch's great sermons, and even a Flickr account of the food that comes out of your church kitchen, which is also great. What's interesting about this approach, though, is when we think about accessing information, what we're actually doing is just putting in a search engine question, and it's linking us with indexed information that already exists. So Dewey, the Dewey Decimal System, this is just a really advanced form of that type of information science where the best results are going to be the most relevant results, right? But this is all or this is all content that actually exists. It's intellectual property. Somebody has written a blog on Epiphany. There's an Epiphany website. There's YouTube videos that are from Epiphany's webpage. There's a Flickr account. All of these things exist. And so when we think about how we search information, what we're actually doing is searching for intellectual property. What a generative tool is doing is very, very different. So instead of putting in the prompt and then expecting it to give us output that exists already, it gives us something new and something that is original and highly specific for our question. This is really, really interesting because as we think about the implications of this, one of the questions that we would have would be, okay, if this is new, we're not talking about a Flickr account, we're not talking about a website or a blog. If this is new, then who owns it? And so OpenAI, the creators of ChatGPT, say that you own the output. You yourself own the output. This is directly from their website. So if you put in a prompt and you get an output, that's publishable if you want it to be, but you own that prompt. Now, as we look at how the large language model actually got the information that it needed to create that prompt, this is a kind of an ethical dilemma for us because you do have legal ownership of this data, but should you? And is it fair to content creators? Is it fair to artists? Is it fair to authors that we have access to and are able to publish this? Another thing that we should probably be aware of is when we think about accuracy, if we are using something like Google, a data retrieval system, we think about the types of persons who create content, and we might be more or less suspect of their opinion based on a variety of biases that we have ourselves. So, for instance, I am far less dubious of a person who is credentialed, who has an article in a peer-reviewed journal, than I would be for someone who is just writing a blog on a topic that's consequential. And you may be as well. And these are sort of the same, some bias filters that we have ourselves as we approach new content or existing content. We think, does this person know what they're talking about? Are they trained? Do other people in their field think that this is a good opinion or not? And we know that as we approach information, that there's always going to be a little bit of bias and some dubious nature to it. But as we think about the information that we get from a large language model, it's not completely accurate. Our best models, something like Meta right now, has about a 76.9% aggregated accuracy rate. ChatGPT 4, which is one of the most heavily used data LLMs, has about a 67.9% accuracy rate. So as we engage with this, we have to know that accuracy and precision are not necessarily going to be at the forefront of our usage. This would then dictate how we use it, how we get access to things. If I'm looking for something highly precise, like do my taxes, here's all the data, do my taxes, I'm going to go to jail because it's not going to be accurate and precise. On the flip side, however, if I ask something like, write me a children's story about a person doing taxes, it can do that. And precision and accuracy aren't necessarily things that I need for that prompt. But this bleeds into the arts. This bleeds into things that we may not have imagined artificial intelligence being able to do. Finally, we talk about something called hallucinations, and these are responses that are not that are misleading or even false. And we'll get to why that occurs here in just a second. One other thing, as we're going through this, I'm gonna if you go to your Menti right now, you will see that there's a space for you to put in questions. And if you have a question, you can just drop it in there, and I will get to it, or I will uh, email you back if I can maybe get your email. Okay, so now we're going to look at how it got the data. We've talked about what it is. It's a chatbot. It's supposed to be a text-to-text chat partner. It's generative, i.e., it creates new data from existing data. Pre-trained deals with how it learned and learns how to do what it does. So one of the really important things to know about a large language model like ChatGPT is that the way that it learns is different from how you learn. So when I started engaging with ChatGPT, what I thought was someone uploaded a bunch of files, peer-reviewed journals and books and art and all sorts of things, and it stored it in some hard drive. And then when you put a prompt in, it would analyze it, and then it would come up with a prompt or an output for you. But that's actually how you learn. That's how I learn. I take in information and I store it to the best of my ability. And then when someone asks me a question, I generate some sort of response. But that's actually not the way a large language model learns and continues to learn. Instead, what a large language model is doing is it's trying to learn what the next most probable word is in a sentence. So, if I'm asking a question about the best church in Seattle, there's a lot of context that I need, but really what the large language model is trying to do is predict the next possible word in a sentence to give you an output. And so it's all based on probability. So when a large language model learns or is pre-trained, it's instead of getting the most accurate, precise, peer-reviewed journals and books and all sorts of things, it's actually just exposed to the most amount of words it can possibly get so that it can learn the relationship between the next possible word in a sentence. So based on this prompt that I'm going to give you now, you can think about what your next most probable word would be. So if I said to you, may the could be the force be with you, if it was May the 4th, maybe. If we're in church, though, it may be may the peace of Christ be with you. It depends. It depends on context. It depends on other factors. But the probability of the word force or peace of Christ is is actually just statistics and probability dependent upon other variables. And this is really odd to us because this is not how we learn. And so, again, instead of all these peer-reviewed pieces of data, the large language model is just exposed to a lot of text. It was exposed to Reddit and Wikipedia and all sorts of just massive amounts of data, chat windows and comment sections to learn how human beings communicate. And so it's looking for pattern recognition. It's looking for next word prediction. And this is really interesting because as we think about how about pre-training, the question that you should have is who determines if it's correct or not? Because some outputs are not just factual, they're subjective. And one of the things that we are learning about large language model training is that we have to tell it which prompts are good and which prompts are not good. And the way that they do this, this was something that was developed by Google, and they do something called reinforcement learning, which is that basic behavioral psychology. Deutsch gives a great sermon, and you say good, good message, Pastor. Deutsch gives a bad sermon, and you just don't say anything or make eye contact on the way out. And so you learn through this through uh, these up and down responses to be better, to change your behavior. But the way this works in the tech world is you can either change the algorithm or an actual human can up or down vote responses. Now, this is really interesting because we would say, well, like, who's in the room? Who's doing this? What's their DEI policy? Do they have one? We don't know. We just don't know. And so this is one of those spaces where I think it's important that the church really think about the nature of truth shaping that happens and how we would want and I think expect and even demand these spaces where humans shape the nature of truth to be diverse and to represent all people and not just folks who maybe look like me. The next, and we're running a little short on time, so I'm going to go to the T very quickly. And the T stands for transformer, and this is basically how the system processes language. So the way that we process language is we would read sequentially. I'm going to read a word, or I'll even say a sentence. Um, I might make a request or a prompt like this. Write me a story about a cat, make it hairy, and make it long. Now, you can probably intuit, because we're all humans here, as far as I can see, that if I say hairy, the subject of that is going to be the cat, right? Not the story. I'm not saying like make it, troublesome, make it have a really troublesome plot. And if I'm saying long, I'm probably referring to the story and not the cat. Machines, though, have a hard time with this. It's hard for them to intuit relationships between like subject and verb and word relationships. Instead of reading sequentially, the way that a large language model reads is it breaks down a sentence into units called tokens. And so, for the purpose of our conversation, each word is one token. And instead of reading it sequentially and having to intuit relationships, it reads it all at once. And through probability, it intuits the relationships. And so this is kind of how it works. This is how it processes information and does so really quickly. Importantly for us, the more tokens in a prompt, the more processing power it takes to process it, which is energy consumption and heat and water usage. I'm going to skip ahead just a little bit because I know that we're tight, but I'm going to look at this question. Is it ethical or acceptable for congregation to have AI assistants writing a sermon? Um, Maybe. Let me put a pin in that. I think that that's a certainly a personal question, but it was related to this, and this is getting back at that really important third way that Kate Ott helped us to understand that we can take as we engage with something new and disruptive. And what sorts of questions should we have if we think about something like ChatGPT that is a chatbot that's generative and has lots of intellectual property concerns or upsides, that's pre-trained, meaning that it's exposed to data and learns the way human beings communicate through language, through probability and statistics, and is a transformer, and that means that it breaks sentences and paragraphs down into bytes that it can read all at once and intuit. If we're going to engage a technology like this, how can we leverage this technology to promote our faith values? What are some potential conflicts between my faith and those of the technology? So we think about maybe ecological implications. We think about diversity, equity, and inclusion issues related to pre-training. We think about intellectual property, plagiarism concerns. How can I advocate for change in technology to better align with my values? These are core questions for what it means to be a digital citizen. But if you want something that's a little more simple, these are the basic questions of social ethics. And as you think about your relationship with a generative language model, a large language model, the question that drives all of our ethical considerations as persons of faith are these two. Who ought I be, child of God? And what ought I do in response to that? And so, how this intersects with sermon writing and usage in the church, this is really your question to address because it comes down really to these two. Who are you, and what does that mean for you to do? How do you live that out in the world? These are questions that we continually have to process as we learn a little bit more about the capabilities of these language models. And and I think that it can help us to sharpen and hone questions to be a little more focused. And so, what I would love if you would go back to your mentee one more time for me, I would love to hear maybe one more pressing question that you would have that you yourself may be willing to explore after this presentation. So, what question that for further clarification, if you didn't understand something, or if a term felt a little odd, or if there's an ethical question that feels really deeply rooted in your own faith that you want to know about and maybe want to know how to advocate, what would that question be? And at this point, I would take just briefly take some questions from you all, but I would have to you need to use the microphone if you have it. Are there any questions? I see a hand. Yeah.
Yes, I don't know whether this specifically answers your question, but I'm an attorney, and I was working on a boundary dispute uh, last week, and so I uh, queried for cases on the subject, and lo and behold, it came up with a homicide.
Hmm.
I don't know whether isn't that ironic, and I know attorneys have gotten in big trouble for using ChatGPT in their pleadings and put it before the court, and just like that, a boundary dispute turns into a homicide.
That's right. And
I
you
was
could, and you,
flabbergasted, and this is the hallucination that you're talking about.
yes,
It's
and you
the
can tell
phenomenon of,
why. Oh, sorry,
huh?
sorry. Go.
Yeah, it's the This is where the ChatGPT and the AI, and it's used. I've taken several continuing legal educations on the topic, and that word hallucination is used quite a bit.
That's right. And you can tell why it would hallucinate. So if we're thinking about the next word in a sentence, it's called next token prediction. If it gets off a little bit, it's wild the types of inaccuracies that you can get. And so that it is not good for torting in creating legal briefs because it will come up with something and you really need to be both accurate and precise, as you well know in law. Let's see. I'm going to go back to the Menti here and see if there's any questions that we have. What AI apps are there, and how to know characteristics of each? Yeah, there are several big companies that have created products. We've talked about ChatGPT. Microsoft has one called Copilot. Uh, Google has one called Gemini. Facebook has one called Meta. One that I really like, though, that really was created out of a need for ethics, is one from the company Anthropic, and it's called Claude.ai. And it is a much more ethically tuned system, particularly related to this pre-training. Because one of the questions that we would have is, did there's no consent in pre-training. Everybody's information is crawled, and so if that's true, did we consent for this to be used to potentially create something new from our own voice? And one example that I would give is I do this something like this for professors, and I create children's books in real time based on their voice, and it freaks them out, obviously. But the question is, if they didn't consent to that data crawling. Should I be should I have access to publish that? If that voice that was trained with blood, sweat, and tears and time away from family and education, I can, but I don't think that I should. Who ought I be? What ought I do? I don't think that I should be able to publish that. Dwight, I see you. How do we know who's behind and influencing the content? We just don't. And I think that that's one of the things that is super important about our own advocacy. We demand transparency, particularly around what's called human or reinforcement learning with human feedback. This is that idea. Reinforcement learning again is, you were good, you got a thumbs up. You were bad, you got, you were punished in some way. It's human feedback that OpenAI pioneered, but who's in the room is a big question that we just don't know. And friends, if our sister in Afghanistan, if our brother on the indigenous reservation in Arizona, if they're not a part of the conversation, if it's not reflective of the body of Christ, we gotta continue talking and advocating. And so demanding transparency so that the nature of truth shaping can be equitable and can continue to invite people to the table is so crucial. But at this point, we just don't know. We don't know who's behind it.
How do you spell the Claude.ai?
Yeah, so it's CLAUDE.ai, and the
Okay.
company is Anthropic.
Andy, I want to thank you so much for your presence here today, and for the insights you've given us, for the education that you've shared with us. It's been super helpful to me, and I think it's been helpful for the folks here. Thank you to Andy. It's my hope that you see him again and again. I enjoy my collaboration conversations with you, and I'm really grateful that you've been able to hook in with us today and give us a little bit of insight. We
Well, thank you
appreciate it.
all. Thank you for the conversation. Thanks for the invitation.
Great. Let's have a little prayer. God of grace and glory, for peace that you bring into our hearts, for our presence with Andy, even though he's far away, the capacity to be together and to think through these important issues, that we know who's in the room, that we continue to honor and respect what you've done to create the body of Christ, Lord, and the manner by which we hear you, and we let your voice resonate through the technologies that we use. For our time together, we give you great thanks. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all.
Thank you. See you, Andy.